The 360 on Energy and Carbon, hosted by 360 Energy. When it comes to utility data, there's a common misconception that it's fixed and beyond your control. However, that's far from the truth. 360 Energy has created an innovative AI-powered platform designed to simplify and automate the complex process of energy and emissions data management. Introducing Envirely. Envirely provides organizations with a comprehensive solution enabling efficient management of energy usage, cost reduction, and greenhouse gas emissions reduction in alignment with global standards. Welcome back, Dave and John.
Really good to be back.
It is a joy, and it's one of the favorite sessions. We have great sessions every week, but this is one of the favorites of the year.
This is my favorite of the year, 100%. And so today, we actually are recording on the day the Spotify Wrap dropped. So Dave and John haven't looked at these numbers or heard these numbers yet. I have. But we're going to just go through them and we're going to see how we did this year. Of course, we have some listeners on some other platforms, so just be mindful of that. But for Spotify, we saw an increase of 27% listeners, 47% in streams, and 78% in followers. So thank you all for staying tuned with us this year.
That's good.
83% of our listeners, hello everyone, discovered us this year. So welcome. I hope you have enjoyed the podcast this year. I hope you take a scroll through our episode catalog and you listen to any of our old episodes because a lot of them are still very much relevant to today. And this is our top episode this year, and I'm going to spoil it. I might mention it later on in today, but our top episode was the Zero Carbon Industrial Heat, the Rondo Heat Battery. So that was with Rondo. So a lot of our listeners really enjoyed that episode, and it was streamed 644% more than our average episode.
I think we also have to get a shout out because I think Rondo really promoted it, and it's attached to their website as well, I think, as one of the items. So.
Now, listeners by age.
Here we go. Drum roll.
All right. 18 to 24, we have over 5% of our listeners. 25 to 29, that's my age group. We got 22% of our listeners. 30 to 34, we have 21% of our listeners. 35 to 44 is 31% of our listeners. 45 to 54 is 10% of our listeners. And 55 plus is 11% of our listeners. So after 55, they just bunch you all together, unfortunately. So we can't see the details over there.
That's a fair statement. Yeah.
That doesn't seem an unreasonable distribution.
No, it's really nice.
I think it's very good distribution.
I agree.
Do they get into discipline? We get to find out where people are.
Unfortunately, we don't know the discipline. Okay. But what I find really interesting is compared to last year, our listeners between 35 to 44 grew by 46%. So we're getting a lot of those mid-range professionals listening to our podcasts.
Fantastic.
Thank you, guys. We want.
Yeah.
Yep. And so now let's talk about where in the world we've been this year. In 2024, they say our show traveled the globe. We were streamed in 27 countries. And because two of us are Canadian, Canada was our top country. So thank you to our Canadian listeners. And so it does talk a bit about other shows our listeners have listened to and the type of music they listen to, but that's not really relevant for us today.
Oh, go on. Tell us the kind of music our listeners listen to.
Okay, so the kind of music, it was funny. I did laugh at it. Number 1's pop. Number 2 is yacht rock. And number 3 is oldies.
That's funny.
I read that and I was like, I don't know if I'll let them know this part.
Yeah. We can cut that, Elena. Yeah,
that's funny. So our videos were much more, 94% more than 2023. So for all of our listeners, this is also a video podcast. You can find it on Spotify and Apple, but you can also find it on YouTube as well. And we were in the top 20% of video podcasts on Spotify, which is some great numbers there.
And all of that done without sponsorship.
I know, it's great. So we were a top 10 show for 76 fans on Spotify. So thank you to those 76 people. And for number one, we were a number one for 12 people. So, hey, if we're your number one podcast, thank you so much.
Big shout out to the 12.
I think that's pretty much all of the fun numbers. We are rated a 5-star still. So thank you all for submitting your ratings. And thank you all for listening to us. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're very grateful. And I think one thing that we continue to convey is if there's things that you want to hear or not hear, please reach out to Lysandra, who's the executive producer, and she'll make sure that we follow suit based on people's input. Yeah.
And our email is always in our podcast description. So please reach out there, reach out on LinkedIn, and we're happy to hear what you have to say. So on that positive note, always great to hear our wrapped for the year. We're going to start into our recap episode. So every year we've actually been answering the same questions. Dave, John, I don't know if you know that, but I do choose the same ones just because it's fun to look back, and it's also fun to highlight these new things that we've learned. To kick off this episode, what were some of the most valuable episodes for our listeners this year? And I'm going to let you say 3, but if you go over 3, I'll forgive you.
Okay, I'll take a stab because I think I went against the rules last time. I think I had more than 3. So in this particular question, I'm going to go with the 3. So they were all, I think, valuable, but the top 3 that I thought for our listeners. So this may be not a surprise to Lysandra. I think the 2 leader series, one with Lee Pearson from Staples and one with Jean-Marc from Honda, talking about the importance of sustainability, how they can keep that continuing throughout the whole organization, how with Honda, how that's going to actually reinvent them to advance their organization. And then episode 112 is with Lee Pearson with Staples. Jean-Marc is episode 132. And the third episode I have is with Tom Rand, the future of clean tech. And the reason why I thought it was so important is that he conveyed, it's very articulate on the value and the benefits of how this whole energy transition is a must if you want to be around in the future. So I thought those, in my view, were kind of the 3 big. Was that a surprise to you, Lysandra?
No, not at all. Not at all. Okay. I knew it would be your top 3. Now, John's top 3, I'm a little conflicted of what I have in my brain, so let's see what John's got today.
He always throws a little wrench.
He does throw a curveball. He does.
Okay, yeah, John. I'm not even sure what my top 3 are. So what I've done for a variety of reasons, my 3 I'm picking out. 137 with Gerald Leonard, investing in sustainability. I thought he was a really interesting guy, and got a real interesting backstory to him, as well as what he talked about. So that was one of mine. Another one of mine was 134 with Bruno Miller, which was the path to sustainable aviation and low carbon flight, because I think that is a real knotty problem that we need to get to grips with, because we're not going to stop flying. We can reduce how much we're doing, but we still need to do it. Mm-hmm. And then, just because I liked it, and that was 127, Adam Pesky on the journey to a sustainable coffee cup.
All right, I got 2 out of 3. In my brain, I got 2 of 3 of those.
Oh, okay. Was the coffee one a surprise for you?
The coffee one was, I thought it was going to be the European energy market with Henning Gloystein.
I didn't want to be predictable.
Okay. So I will speak from our listeners' perspectives, and our listeners really enjoyed all of our episodes that tackled the transformative technology conversations and global challenges. So our listeners' top 3 was episode 124, which is the future of clean tech and climate action in Canada. Episode 122, which is zero carbon industrial heat, the Rondo heat battery. And episode 130, which is the role of critical metals in clean energy. And that episode was with Mohammed Dus Mohammadi, who talked about those critical metals, and it was a really unique episode. So this one is a question for you both. And this is a really good question because you two speak to a lot of people in the industry. But what episode had the biggest impact on the way you think?
You want to go first, John?
Okay. I've got three.
So do
Oh,
I.
okay, that's okay. I'll
But
take three.
I think, well, okay, in reverse order, it was 127 again with the sustainable coffee cup, because I like the idea of how we can relate something that's so everyday as a cup of coffee to what we should be doing. And again, 134, Bruno Miller on the sustainable aviation. But I'm actually going to come in with one of our listeners' favourites was Mohammed in 130 on critical metals in clean energy. I think the idea that he was talking there not only about better ways of extracting materials, but the circularity of the economy of it, and how so many people are going, oh, if we're going to have EVs, we're going to have to keep mining and mining critical materials. And he's saying, no, you won't. We will be able to recycle. We will have processes for that. So I think that was pretty impactful.
So my three, 114, Gary Holden, solar generation, and he talked about how the markets in New Zealand were set up to advance significant solar generation and how it would actually works really well in the marketplace. That was kind of music to my ears because every time we hear solar generation renewable, we always hear a conflict of how problematic it is in the marketplace, and he was conveying how it's working and the strides and the improvements in solar generation. Quite interesting. The next one was episode 116, entry into the carbon credit side. So I had my impression of carbon credits and what it was and what it wasn't. I was really intrigued and interested on what was conveyed there and how it worked. Actually, how she started the business. I thought that was fascinating. And then episode 128 with Rob Cummings, sustainable concrete. And we know concrete cement is one of the biggest areas of focus or carbon emissions. You're burning rock. But the way he was discussing is that he was really loving to dig into this, and that he thought there was a really good opportunity to go after this. And that was, again, music to my ears, because a lot of times you hear these big industries talk, but he kind of looked like, no, we're going to go at it, and we're going to go at it hard. And so I found that was kind of interesting to hear that.
On my end, I think the one that had the biggest impact on the way I think was our episode with Tucker Perkins, episode 129, which is surprising advancements in propane technology. For me, it was very surprising. I think a lot of the times our guests on this podcast tend to be more in the clean energy space. So innovative technology or maybe manufacturing customers that are actually implementing clean tech. But it was good to get a perspective, very similar to last year when we had the oil and gas industry on, get a perspective from someone in the fossil fuel industry, and talking about how a legacy fuel can maybe evolve into something more sustainable.
I would agree to that. I think I even said to Tucker, I'm not sure he liked it, but I thought, wow, I never thought about propane being renewable and the importance of
No,
it. So it was
no.
it
Yeah.
was a good call.
So now for our listeners, if someone was listening at an executive level, what are the top 3 episodes you would recommend?
Okay, episode 117 with Lee Pearson, Staples. They had been working on this for a long, long time, and she really laid the groundwork of what it means and how to do it. I thought she did a really nice job in articulating this, that it makes really good sense. It goes right to the bottom line. And they had done it for many, many years. We see companies may just start and they struggle with it or they stop it. And they've been doing it for a long time. So I was impressed. The next one was with Greg Carley, episode 131, Embracing Sustainability Disclosure Standards. Why I thought that was really important is that I actually think these standards are currently voluntary, but my impression based on work we've been doing is this will become mandatory, and executives should be using this not as a stick, but use it as a carrot of how they can actually do things and how they can get measured results. I thought Greg covered that quite well, and it's a Canadian standard. The last one was one that we had recently, and it was with Sarah Keys, and that's understanding Bill C-59. Again, I've been getting feedback from different people that Bill C-59 is a problem, like it's creating all sorts of not allowing us to do what we need to do. I would say glass half full. I think if you look at this and you lay out what Sarah conveyed of all the different type of protocols you follow, and again, very clear then you actually have a roadmap of what to do and how to do it. So I actually thought that was a really good one for executives to listen to because they'll be interested in risk and risk management.
John?
Okay, a little bit of overlap. I was going Sarah Keys because I think it's not just Canadian, because you look at that and we know that it's caused a number of players to withdraw what they've put in their websites. And I think other jurisdictions in the world are looking at what Canada has done there. And I feel a sense of nervousness amongst people who disclose and with ESG reporting. So I think that is a critical C-suite episode, because we've got to move beyond the let's all say we're going to do net zero by 2050. You can say that safely. We aspire to do this. But the minute you start saying this is what we've done, you've got to be so careful to make sure that you're disclosing properly. So I think that's one. The other one is one I've mentioned earlier, which is 137 with Gerald Leonard, investing in sustainability. Survivability is taking your business from 1 year to the next. Sustainability is taking it from one generation to the next. So I think it's quite interesting, because many people in the C-suite are sort of held ransom, if you like, by shareholders and stockholders who want rapid return. But I think people are increasingly understanding that short-term return is not what's going to make for good term, long investment, etc. So I would go with that. And then I'm going to go for 125, internal recording.
You stole mine.
Navigating the corporate energy challenges, because I think that is we produced it. Well, you produced it, we spoke it. But I think that was a valuable episode.
Well, I have some overlap with the two of you. I think both of you basically covered mine. But number one, Tom Rand, in my opinion, The Future of Clean Tech and Climate Action Canada. That was episode 124. I think it gave a macro level perspective of emerging opportunities and challenges in clean tech. So it's kind of a good overall episode to listen to hear what's going on around the clean energy, clean tech space. Next, I have the Understanding Bill C-59 with Sarah Keys. She provided some great insights into the legislation that's out and its implications for the corporations, and especially when it comes to sustainability reporting, which again, if you're an executive, you should be very in tune with this. And number three is our internal recording. Again, it's the Navigating Corporate Energy Challenges, episode 125. I think it gave a lot of practical solutions to manage energy, costs, risk, and regulatory requirements. And of course, that's something that we preach in our podcast as well, preach in our business at 360 Energy. All right. So my next top three question is, if someone was listening from the manufacturing industry, what are the top three episodes you would recommend?
I'll have a go at this. I was just thinking we could have really made this podcast boring by just having the same three for every
for every single one.
But there is some overlap. Okay. And we will start seeing more overlap now, I think, because of that. The three that I picked out, 128, Rob Cummings with the sustainable concrete. I think that's a really good one. 130 with Mohammed on the critical metals. And then I did want to pick out one of the leader series, which would be 132 with Jean-Marc Leclerc from Honda.
Great episodes, John.
Lysandra, for some reason, I didn't have that. I had what was the biggest takeaway, so I can't respond to your question.
No worries. John covered my three, so John's letting the manufacturing industry know what they should listen to. So John's opinion is key here.
Yeah.
All right. So for you both, what is your biggest takeaway? What was your aha moment?
Right. I'll take since I missed the last one, I'll do this one. So what was interesting, Tom Rand, and John and I have, by the way, we've talked this, but not often do you hear people say this. And Lysandra, I think it was just you and I on the call when we were saying, like, how do you make this stick? Like, how do you make this happen? He said, effectively, this now has to become a strategic advantage or an issue that actually organizations have to look at. They can't keep on putting this to middle management that they don't have a budget or they don't have a long-term vision. And John and I have been talking about that forever. So the fact that he said that, I thought, so yes, that's what we have to do. And I think we have forgotten to stress how strategic of an advantage it was. So I thought that was really good. Next, Ed Crooks is vice chairman for Wood Mackenzie, and he's actually has this Energy Gang podcast as well. It was interesting that he said, and I don't know if this was recorded, I think it was, but he said, it's interesting that energy is probably 5% of people's operating costs, not really thought of, not ever considered. It's actually probably the last thing they think of. And he said it so well. It's actually the first thing they should think of, because without energy, they don't have a business. Mm-hmm. And so they have to start thinking differently. And I thought, okay, yep, spot on. That was really well stated. And then the last thing was with Adam Pensky on sustainability coffee, and that, wait a minute, you mean if we don't correct climate change, we might not have coffee? And I thought, wow, if we told the world that, maybe they would just start doing something on sustainability. So that kind of caught my attention.
Also, it's a good coffee place. He's located in the GTA. I had my friends in Toronto go visit for me to see how it was, and everyone's recommended it. So please check out Reunion Coffee if you're in the area. John?
Oh, I'm going to go for that aha point on the coffee. I'm a coffee-driven person.
Yeah.
I must admit, at times I've had a little bit of guilt about my coffee habit. Mm-hmm. I really try to, use a reusable cup, or if it's a disposable one. So I hadn't really thought about, where the beans grow in that sense. But I think my biggest takeaway is actually you've got to have an open mind, and you've got to listen to a lot of people. And we have been really fortunate with the guests that we've had, and also with the sort of bouncing off each other in these podcasts, that we've been able to openly explore a number of areas without getting super critical. And I think that is important, because there's a problem that we touched on the age demographic earlier. Mm-hmm. And there is a well-known thing that in the, what was it, 50 plus, you're all lumped together?
55 plus.
55 plus. There is a common perception that there's a hardening of opinions in that group. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we show that isn't the case. I think we want to encourage people who have got hardened opinions, listen to something else. The propane one is a good example of it. Yeah. If we had been evangelical podcasters, I think we would have said, we're not having propane, guy. What do we want that for? Mm. So that, plus the fact that, there's an awful lot of good material in there. Now, I don't know how most people access their podcast, but I know a few people I do know who are regular podcast listeners. It's on the commute, in the gym, mm-hmm. somewhere like that, something you can listen to, jogging, whatever. Why not? It's making good use of that time. And perhaps here's a challenge to some of our listeners. Have a look at our catalogue and listen to one that you don't want to.
That's what I was going to say, John. That's my aha moment.
Yeah.
You're reading my mind. I think similar to how they lump the 55 plus, and you're saying a perspective that their minds can't be changed, I can say the exact same thing about my age group. I think a lot of times we formulate opinions at a really young age, and we're kind of stuck to these opinions, and it's really important to fact check ourselves and make sure that we're constantly growing with new information.
Yes.
You can have an opinion today and change your opinion tomorrow. It's not a bad thing to change your opinion and build on it based on new information. And
Absolutely.
So for me, my aha moment, again, because of some of these episodes that we've had that are really outside of the box and really different in 2024 in comparison to our previous podcast years, I recommend the exact same thing as John. Scroll through the one that sounds the most boring or the least interesting or the most anti your opinion. Listen to it, learn something from it. And I'm sure you'll find an aha moment there.
You know what? I think it's so true. I just want to reinforce what John and you both are saying. Is I think the challenge with the world is that we all have a certain set of opinion and we don't listen to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the challenge we need to continue in this podcast is to bring people from all diverse groups for them to speak and for people to learn. I think that will be critical for us to go forward. I think that's what the world needs is instead of just one singular mindset, we need to hear other people's thoughts. So I think you guys brought up really a critical point that we need.
I
Ah,
always I always think the smartest people are the people that know that they don't know enough because there's
Yes.
so much information out there. There's so many experts, so many industries, so many fields. If the more you know, the less you know. And
Yes.
yeah.
every year, what I realize every year on my birthday, I sit there and I'm like, I know absolutely nothing because there's so much to know.
It's true.
Can I say, I like the idea that we open to a wide range of opinions, but I think we have to have a guideline. I don't really want to do an episode with a climate change skeptic.
Hey, John, we might put you in a room with one. So
Yeah,
never say no.
Yeah, John. Just you might have
You
just
gave
thrown
me an
down the
idea.
gauntlet. You may have just thrown down the gauntlet on that one.
I might have.
Now, would it be published? That's another story.
My concern with it would be, in all seriousness, and it's one, and I can't remember it exactly. What was it? A fanatic, and it may have been Winston Churchill that said a fanatic is somebody who won't change the subject and they won't change their mind.
Fair enough.
No, all seriousness, I would be more than happy with any guest we've got who's prepared to be open-minded.
Yes.
Yes, that's the key.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, for my last question today, what lesson do you hope our listeners take away from episodes 111 to 141 this year? It's been a great year. We've had 31 new episodes, and we've also had 19 new guests. So, again, thanks all for following along with us throughout our 2024 journey. What's our biggest takeaway for our listeners?
You want to take it that, John, and I'll go after you.
Are you sure you know what your biggest takeaway is?
I listen. I've got 4 pages of it, so we're good.
Okay. I think my biggest takeaway is, and it's a positive one, there's a lot of people out there who are enthusiastic about making a change in this world and are prepared to share their knowledge.
Great
Okay.
takeaway.
Well,
That's it. You can have 4 pages now.
that was pretty succinct. Okay, so maybe I should have gone. Okay, so listen, there's 4 things I think it was reinforced. One, the importance of entrepreneurs and their involvement in innovation, because I think that will be critical as we go forward. If you rely on the people that have been in the industry for a long time, I'm not sure they're motivated to advance and change. So I think entrepreneurs, and we can talk about Dev Jan for energy modeling. We can talk about Adam Pensky with sustainable coffee, Jana McDonald for carbon markets, Tom Rand for venture capital, Bruno Miller on aviation fuel, Mohammed for recycling precious metals. Those are all entrepreneurial people that are changing what's going on in the world. Next, sustainability does not have to be expensive, and it actually impacts the bottom line in a positive way. So Dev Jane 113 episode and Gerald Leonard, coming back to what you're saying, John, 137, he talked about actually it goes right to the bottom line. It makes good sense. Next thing, energy markets and having stable policy. So markets send proper signals if it's set up properly, the marketplace, and stable policy is really critical. And I think we heard that a lot from Stephen Short, Rob Cummings, whose cement industry is talking about keep the carbon tax here, keep it going. We need to have those signals. And Gerald Leonard as well, 137. Next, renewable energy, and it will play a significant role as we advance in this transition. Episode 114, Gary Holden, Rondo Energy that we've talked about, which is one of the most popular, and Bruno Miller 134 with aviation fuels. Like renewable energy there's no doubt that will continue to grow and there's an opportunity. So I think we covered a lot of material that reinforces that this is a market opportunity and it's not a fad as it was described to me once by an executive that it is real.
I have 3 main takeaways I hope our listeners get from this year's of episode, whatever I meant to say there. This year of episodes? That's probably what I meant to say. There we go. Number 1, the urgency of addressing climate change. That's something that all of our podcast guests have emphasized. The world is changing. They're all changing. There's a lot of business innovation out there to support this. And our podcast guests all highlighted that. Next is building partnerships to bridge knowledge and operational gaps. I think that's something that we've taken as a big valuable takeaway from all of our guest episodes. Just making sure you're talking to people in the industry. The connections and the things you'll learn from things people have done is invaluable in the sense that you can't get it unless you're doing it. So make sure you're out there and you're talking to people and you're bridging that gap. And lastly, small incremental changes with good leadership is going to drive major impact. So things don't need to change overnight, but small changes need to be made, and together they will have an incremental impact on your business and how your company moves forward. And I think all of our guests highlighted that. This is not an easy thing. We're not saying it's easy, but it's worth it. And you can make changes today by doing something small. And a small change is better than no change.
So last thing, I just want to say, I want to thank you both. It's just been a real pleasure. I love doing this every week. And
Yes.
I'm so glad you guys are with me on this journey, and I'm looking forward to 2025. So thank you, both of you, for this.
Yeah, and shall we have just a little shout out for Alana, who has to
Yes.
edit this and work out what's good, what's bad, and fit it all together.
Our editor, who has to listen to hours of our conversation, has to go through this. And so absolutely, Alana, we couldn't have done it and can't do it without you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, major thank you to Elena. Thank you, Dave and John. This is
And thank
always
you,
so much
Lysandra.
fun to do. We started this in 2021. We're moving to 2025. Really exciting stuff. So many amazing guests, so many great episodes to be recorded. And thank you to our listeners. Without you listening, we would
Definitely.
not be recording this. We love to hear ourselves have these conversations, but we love that you love to hear these conversations. So please stay with us next year, and some exciting guests coming up, as well as some exciting internal episodes in January 2025. All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Goodbye to everybody.
Yes.
Have a good one.
That's all for today's episode of the 360 on Energy and Carbon podcast. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check us out on our website at 360energy.net and follow us on LinkedIn at 360energy Inc. Tune in to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Anchor, or other listening platforms by searching the 360 on Energy and Carbon. You can watch the video recording and subscribe on YouTube at 360 Energy Inc. Email us your feedback at podcast@360energy.net or comment on our LinkedIn posts. See you next week.